Over the last year now, there's been a lot of talk about dicamba getting used, especially on crops like Xtend soybeans. Well, if you have Xtend soybeans and you want to spray dicamba, we're just going to tell you this: it's about time to be done. We'll explain why here today.
All right, if you've got dicamba or Xtend soybeans, you're thinking, hey, I'm really excited here. I've got a product that can kill some of these resistant weeds, and that is good. And we've spoken all year about this, that it starts with a great residual program. We start down before we even plant, getting residual herbicides out there, then adding a residual in with our first post-emerge pass to give us even longer control on some of these tough weeds. Now when we get into the later part of the season, once soybeans begin flowering and beyond, you really don't want to have to spray a herbicide out there at all because it's going to put stress on the beans. So not only are we thinking about your beans in your field and reducing stress there, we're certainly thinking about your neighbors around you.
If you look right on the XtendiMax or Ingenia or Fexapan, one of the actual products, you look on the label of those herbicides, it's going to tell you you can spray up to R1. That's first flower in soybeans. Well, here's the thing that we know. Once you get up to flowering in a sensitive soybean plant, so in other words, a straight Roundup plant or a Liberty soybean, those soybeans are much more sensitive. Now, with dicamba, it only takes a whiff to cup the leaves. It just takes a little bit more than that to potentially hurt yield. So we have to be really careful with this. And what we've advised farmers to do is, hey, why don't you just wrap that dicamba spraying up a little bit earlier? If you've got plenty of residual herbicides out, hopefully you got the 3 pre's out, maybe you followed with a couple more residuals early post, you should be sitting in pretty good shape. We just need to burn stuff down now, and hopefully that residual of those other herbicides carries us until we get good crop canopy. So our suggestion in a lot of areas is finish up the spraying around June 15th or so, if at all possible. In indeterminate soybeans, they start flowering based on when the days shorten. Well, the days don't begin shortening until June 22nd. So usually we don't have flowering until at least that time. And that's the reason why we want to get this spraying done now. We're still in the vegetative stages. We just want to finish up this dicamba spraying before we get into the reproductive stages. Now, as I say this, in some states, you are required to finish spraying earlier. Obviously, we've got to follow whatever that state says. But all I'm saying is here, if in your state you're able to spray till R1, we'd probably suggest you don't wait and spray that long if there are any sensitive crops nearby. No sensitive crops nearby, not a big deal, just follow the label.
Let's assume that you are still on label applying dicamba right now and you've got a little bit more to get finished up here and you say, man, I'm heading out real soon here to get this done. Let's start talking about what can be done to reduce drift and reduce problems and address some of the things that happened last year.
Well, the first thing we're going to tell you is follow the label. There were some label changes from last year. So for example, all these dicamba products that are labeled on Xtend crops post-emerge, they are now restricted use. So you have to keep records on those. Another thing that changed from last year is you can only spray them during the daylight hours. You cannot spray them after sunset or before sunrise in the morning. Now, along those lines, I would take that a step further. If I've got sensitive crop near me, my advice to you is I'm going to finish spraying 4 hours before sunset. And the reason why is because I want to get that product fully absorbed into the plant. Here's what I know. When we get into the evening, what we have is usually humidity goes up, there's moisture that's starting to form on that leaf, and there's a lot less chance that that crop protection product, that dicamba, is going to get fully absorbed into the leaf. Well, if it does get fully absorbed into the leaf, we have a lot less chance for volatility. Okay, we have a lot less chance for off-target movement. So yes, I do want the wind to be down. You have to have the wind less than 10 miles an hour. I get that. And you might say, well, the only time is evening. I still don't want to spray in the evening. I really don't. I want you to finish up 4 hours before evening, or before sunset, I should say, in order to hopefully fully get that product absorbed into the leaf. In addition, the other thing I would do is I would just make sure the wind is blowing away from a sensitive crop, not just today, but tomorrow also. You do those two things and you should be in pretty good shape in addition to following the label.
All right, let's talk about the tank as well. We don't want to leave spray mixed up in the tank overnight. So don't mix up a batch that you're going to spray tomorrow. Say, yep, it's supper time. I need to quit for today, but I'm going to mix up a batch so it's ready to go in the morning. Don't do that. There's a chance that it could grab some contaminants out of that tank, something that's deep in the pores of the tank, or something that had dried on earlier and now you broke loose. You don't want to have that happen and then have some kind of issue with spray tank contamination. The other thing is, let's say you're done spraying dicamba and you say, oh, just got done. Now I'm going to move on and start spraying other things. You want to make sure you've got that tank and boom cleaned out really well. We saw a number of issues for farmers across the country last year that thought, well, I'm just going to double rinse and I'll be fine. Or I'm going to use bleach, or I'm going to use, some household ammonia. That stuff just doesn't work very well. We've got to do a really good job cleaning things out, because the difference with dicamba versus other products, it's not like it's so much more dangerous to work with, but the tolerance for soybeans, especially once you start flowering, as Brian mentioned before, is so small. We can only have just a tiny, tiny dose of dicamba and we'll see some symptomology. Just be really fussy, making sure you get everything in that sprayer cleaned out well.
There are some people who say we shouldn't spray dicamba anymore at all, but the problem right now is we have Roundup resistant weeds without a good way to control them. Now, we are super excited for someday when we have stacks, when there is a stack of Liberty together with dicamba. So you can use dicamba as a burn down or early season, follow with Liberty later on. That should be great. But for today, on millions of acres across the country, Xtend is a good answer. We just have to be super careful and encourage you to be super careful with how you're using that dicamba.
Well, dicamba certainly is important chemistry, especially when we have tough weeds to control like our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?